I had always been a creature of habit. Every evening after work, I'd sit in my living room chair, sip my tea, and unwind with the TV in the background. The quiet rhythm of the neighborhood usually lulled me into a sense of peace. But about a week ago, something strange started happening. It was a Monday night, the first time I saw him. I glanced out the window, just a quick look, but there he was, standing in my front yard, perfectly still. He wasn't doing anything, just staring at my house at me. I figured he was lost or waiting for someone. I even stood up to get a better look, but he turned and walked away as soon as I moved. The next evening it happened again. Same time, same spot. The man stood just outside my window, completely motionless. He was closer this time, staring at the living room like he knew I was there. My chest tightened with unease. It was too much of a coincidence now. I stood up, hoping to scare him off by making myself visible. But as before, he simply turned and disappeared into the night. By the third night, my nerves were on edge. I wasn't imagining it. This guy was coming back. And for what? I told myself it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I grabbed my phone and went to the window again, determined to look closer, but the man was already there. This time, he was standing at the edge of my porch. He was too close. I had had enough. I grabbed my jacket, threw open the front door, and stormed outside. But the second I stepped onto the porch, he was gone. I stood there, scanning the street, but it was empty. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. He had vanished, as if he'd never been there at all. That night I barely slept. I stayed up, pacing the living room and watching the window, but the man didn't return. The next night, he was back again, just after sunset. He was standing in the same spot, but now he was even closer, right at the foot of my porch. I could see him more clearly now. His skin was pale, his clothes dark and weathered, but his eyes unsettled me the most. They seemed hollow, as if he were staring right through me. My stomach twisted with fear. I picked up my phone and dialed the police, but as the phone rang, I saw him move for the first time. Slowly he began to walk toward the window. My breath caught in my throat. He stepped onto the porch, coming closer, his face partially illuminated by the soft light inside my house. When he was just a foot away from the window, I froze. His face pressed against the glass, his eyes, empty, lifeless, locked onto mine. I dropped my phone. The sound of it hitting the floor was a distant echo in the back of my mind. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, just like that, he disappeared. One moment, he was standing there. The next, he was gone. I rushed to the door, yanked it open, and stepped out onto the porch. But there was no sign of him, no footsteps, no shadows, just an eerie silence that hung in the air. I called the police again, but there was nothing to find by the time they arrived. No sign anyone had been there at all. They took my statement and promised to patrol the area, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. To them, I was just a guy who had a bad dream. The next few nights were quiet. I almost convinced myself that I'd imagined the whole thing, that the man was just a figment of my overworked mind. But last night, everything changed. I woke up in the middle of the night to a soft tapping sound. I opened my eyes and realized it was coming from the window. My heart pounded in my chest. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Slowly, I turned my head. There he was. The man was back. But this time, he wasn't standing outside. He was inside, standing by the window, tapping lightly on the glass from the inside. His lips curled into a wide, unnatural smile that sent ice through my veins. I scrambled out of bed, backing away, but he didn't move. He just stood there, smiling at me. I realized that it had never been about watching me from outside. He had been waiting, and now he was inside my house. It started with the weirdest discovery. I'd just gotten home from a brutal day of classes, ready to crash in front of the TV, when something caught my eye. Something small, shiny, and out of place, nestled between a stack of books on the shelf. At first, I thought it was just a reflection, but when I reached for it, my hand closed around a tiny black object. A camera. A hidden camera. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't installed this, and I lived alone. Who the hell put this here? I flipped it over in my hand, my pulse racing, searching for some clue as to where it came from, but it was just a plain, unmarked camera. No brand name, no label, nothing. I stood there for a moment, frozen. Was someone watching me? How long had it been there? A chill ran down my spine as the thought sank in. I quickly stuffed the camera into my pocket, my eyes darting around the room like I expected someone to jump out from behind the furniture. My apartment was small, just a typical college rental. One bedroom, cramped kitchen, and a living room that doubled as my study space. It wasn't exactly the place you'd expect someone to be spying on. I dropped my backpack, grabbed my laptop, and sat down at the kitchen table, determined to figure out where the camera had come from. My hands trembled as I connected it to my computer. A folder popped up, and I found dozens of video files inside. My stomach twisted as I clicked on the most recent one. It was me, sitting at this very table, typing away at my laptop just last night. The video played in eerie silence, showing me completely unaware that I was being filmed. I fast-forwarded through the footage, watching myself move around the apartment, reading, eating, even sleeping. I felt sick. Who was watching this? I scanned the room again, my heart hammering. I had no enemies, at least none I knew of. But this wasn't just some prank. Someone had been recording me for who knows how long. And then it hit me. What if this camera was still streaming? I opened the camera's settings, dread pooling in my stomach as I navigated through the menus. My worst fear was confirmed. The camera had been live streaming to some anonymous website. I clicked the link, my fingers shaking. The page loaded slowly, and my screen filled with endless streams of faces and rooms just like mine, all broadcasting live. I scrolled through the list until I found my stream. It had been running for days, and there were comments, dozens of them. She's home. Why hasn't she noticed? I think she found the camera. I slammed my laptop shut, panic flooding every inch of my body. This wasn't just some random surveillance. People watched me in real time, commenting and analyzing my every move, my every private moment. I could feel eyes on me even though I was alone in the room. Or was I? I shot up from my chair and grabbed my phone, dialing the police. As I paced the small living room, the walls felt like they were closing on me. Whoever did this knew every corner of my space, every moment of my life. They had access to everything, and worst of all, they were still watching. The operator answered, and I tried to explain the situation, my words coming out in a panicked rush. But before I could finish, I heard a creak from the hallway. I froze. The hallway light was off, but there was movement, shadows shifting out of sight. I backed away, the phone clutched in my hand. My heart pounded so loudly in my ears that I could barely hear the operator asking me if I was okay. I wasn't. I moved to the door, reaching for the knob, but before I could turn it, I heard something, a voice, faint but distinct. She's leaving. It wasn't coming from my phone. It was coming from the camera. It was around midnight when I first heard the noise, a soft, repetitive thumping, like someone was walking above me. I paused my movie and stared at the ceiling, confused. I live on the top floor. There's no one above me. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was the wind or some weird building creak. But then it came again, louder this time. Footsteps, clear and deliberate, pacing back and forth across the ceiling. My stomach tightened. I stood up, listening closely, hoping I was just imagining it. But no, there it was again. Thud, thud, thud. Moving across the ceiling from one side of the room to the other. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe the sound was traveling from a lower floor. Perhaps someone was hammering or dropping something, echoing strangely through the building. But it didn't stop. The footsteps continued, slow and steady, as if someone was wandering around. And then, they started getting closer. I grabbed my phone, feeling every inch of the silence around me. The footsteps grew heavier and louder, moving toward the bedroom, toward me. My heart raced, and my palms began to sweat as I stepped back, my eyes glued to the ceiling, How was this happening? There was no attic, no empty apartment above mine, just the roof. I swallowed hard and dialed my building's maintenance line, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. But as I spoke, the footsteps stopped, right above me. The line rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. No help was coming. I stood frozen, the phone still clutched, when the thumping started again. Only now, it was directly overhead, moving slowly, methodically toward the far side of the apartment, as if whoever, or whatever it was circling the room. I bolted into the hallway, my heart in my throat. The footsteps followed, growing louder with each step I took, as though something unseen was tracking my every move. My pulse pounded in my ears. I turned the corner and pressed my back against the wall, trying to calm myself, but the noise persisted, growing heavier, closer. It was no longer just footsteps. There was a creaking sound, like something dragging across the floor above me, or through the ceiling itself. A low, ominous groan echoed through the walls, making the hairs on my neck stand up. My chest tightened with panic, and I could feel my throat drying out as I dialed the police. This was real. Someone, or something, was in my apartment, and I had no idea what to do. But as soon as the dispatcher answered, the noise stopped. Completely. The silence was deafening, as if a vacuum had eaten all the air out of the room. 911, what's your emergency? The voice on the other end asked. I opened my mouth to respond, but I hesitated. How could I explain this? Those footsteps were coming from a place that shouldn't exist. Before I could answer, there was a loud thump from the ceiling above me. It was followed by a low, slow scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor or ceiling, a few inches above my head. Hello? The dispatcher's voice snapped me back to reality. Ma'am, are you okay? I hear something. There's someone... My voice cracked as I glanced at the ceiling, dreading what might come next. Stay on the line, ma'am. Police are on their way. I tried to steady my breathing as I edged toward the front door, but something deep inside me told me I wouldn't make it out in time. The footsteps resumed. Only now, they weren't just on the ceiling. They came down the walls like whatever was up there had found a way in. I watched in horror as faint, slow-moving indentations began to form in the drywall, as though invisible hands were pressing through, trying to reach me. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock as a loud crash echoed. Something had fallen, something heavy. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to know what it was. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the hallway, my heart pounding. As I slammed the door shut behind me, I could still hear those footsteps moving closer, chasing me,